What's up guys, Lockie here, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to get 10 times better at anything in half the time. Now I'm going to actually be focusing on a sales example in this video, so if you're an offer owner and want to make 10 times the amount of sales in half the time, or you're a sales rep who wants to make 10 times the amount of money in half the time, this video is going to be extremely valuable for you. It's actually a screen recording of an internal training that I gave to my sales team when we scaled to $1 million a month cash collected in 16 months. So let's dive into my laptop. It's a pretty information dense session, but if you really lock in, grab a pen and a pad, this video will change the way you actually learn for the rest of your life. It took me a very long time to develop this, and it's going to give you a huge edge on beating everyone else in your field. Let's crush it.
Alrighty, let's get into it. Now, this is going to be a pretty heavy session, so I highly recommend you come back and watch this multiple times. So the topic is, how do we get 10 times better in half the time? Something we would all love to do. Well, you need to learn 10 times more from the same information twice as fast as you are now. That is the literal equation here that we're trying to achieve. So we'll start off with some more theories and way of thinking, and then we'll get into some more practical, and then we'll get into some actual action steps from here. So the problem is information overload and implementation underwhelm. Working on too many things at once. And a really good analogy here is you can read 10 different marketing books and still suck at marketing versus reading one marketing book, but you actually implement everything in the book when you're doing your marketing. It's common sense, so you're obviously going to be way better, right? And this is in the theory and the process of, or in the spirit of me teaching you how to learn more effectively, rather than me just doing 3 times more call reviews. I feel like, obviously I'm still doing call reviews, and you'll get value out of every single call review, but I feel like we've hit a little bit of a critical mass in terms of the content and the topics of, there's a lot in the LMS for you to learn from. You just need to learn how to learn better, because we're actually never taught how to learn, which is pretty ironic. Cool. I think like this all makes a lot of sense, right? You need to fundamentally level up and change the way you evaluate problems and process information as a human being. I know that sounds pretty intense, but like what we're talking about here is how to do this. And really how to do this is actually how to improve the quality of your life 10 times faster in half the time as every other human on the planet. That's how very successful people get successful. They're not actually special snowflakes or anything. The people who are successful fast, let me put it that way. If you've just been doing the same thing for 50 years and you're 45 and you're 55 and you're 65 and you've got success, that's more of a compounding effect. But the people who are really young and really successful, it's, obviously they may have had an advantage, but the ones who have gone from scratch, it's because they learn faster, because they get more out of the same information as everyone else. So most people, this is kind of like how I would describe it. And this is the first time I've verbalized or articulated a lot of these concepts. So bear with me if they're not as clear as I would like them to be. So I feel like most people go through life like a kite in the wind. Like they're trying and failing to assess what the problems are in their life, which is actually holding them back from achieving the life they want. They're too generic, and they lack the ruthless clarity and sharpness of the top 1% who consistently win, right? In terms of analyzing what's actually holding them back. Then, because of that, they implement watered down, soft, and blurry half solutions, which feel like they're actually working on the problem, but they never create breakthroughs. And then also, to be candid, the follow through and the consistency of which they implement those watered down solutions also suck. So I'd say, let me just add that in here. Plus, implementation sucks, right? So in simple terms, they do what they always have, therefore they get what they've always gotten. And as we know, that's the definition of insanity. Now, in more complex terms, we need to look at the same things you have before, but you need to now see that of which you've been blinded to in the past. So you need to be able to assess the information that's in front of your eyes and the granularity to it, which reveals the truth, which you've been blind to in the past. And we do this by approaching the information and situation differently to how you have done it in the past. Then try again and again until it's simply how you approach these things. For complete transparency's sake, the reason I let someone go is, maybe there's culture things as well, for sure. But if someone's a great culture fit, but I let them go, it's usually because, and this is for you to just have better information to upskill, right? And just understand how the real world works. It's typically because, number one, maybe they were just way too junior to begin with. But if they have some experience, the reason I've let them go, or someone would get let go from a championship team, is because the coach doesn't feel like the putting the time and effort into training is going to produce the reward. They essentially analyze the person and they say, I'm going to have to put in too much time and energy and training into this person to get too little reward. Now, why would a coach think that? They would think that, number one, because the person they view the person's personality and hunger and drive and motivation and commitment to the thing not high enough that it's even worth it, right? So that would be the first one. But assuming that you're showing up, you're hungry, you're putting in the additional effort, and you're doing all those things. The second one would be is the coach doesn't assume, or the coach assumes that the person's rate of learning is going to be too slow in relation to the result that they're going to get. Because if a person's rate of learning is slower, it means you have to put in more time and effort to actually get a lower output and a result because they're not as good, right? And so what happens most of the time in championship teams, and being very candid with you, is number one, you'll get cut if the coach thinks that you are just simply not committed and you're not willing to put in the time and the effort and the energy and the commitment and the sacrifices to be good. And then the second thing is they view your rate of learning too slow. And they say, okay, it's better that I put in, because we all have finite resources, right? So for example, for me, I would analyze it, not from a heartless point of view or anything, because I love everyone and want you to win, but I would review it as, okay, if I'm going to put an hour, 2 hours, over the course of months, tens and tens of hours of training, would I rather put it into this person or who, has a slow rate of learning, or would I rather put it into the other person on the team who has a fast rate of learning? Or would I rather bring in a new person to the team to replace that person who has a faster rate of learning? Those are essentially, or number four is, would I rather do it myself? I would never rather do it myself because I want to build a massive empire where everyone's winning. If I wanted to be a solopreneur and just take sales calls by myself and just manage clients, I mean, Lucas and I did that for a while and it wasn't very fulfilling. We want to have a huge, huge impact on the world. So for me, that fourth one isn't an option. But those other three ones are very real options. And so if I was a team member and I was thinking, how do I provide the most value? How do I crush my own goals? How do I do that? I want to make sure that putting the time into me, because my rate of learning is the highest, is the obvious and only option. Because if that isn't the option, then they'll put the time and effort into someone else who will produce a higher return, aka a higher rate of learning, or I'm going to be replaced with someone else in the marketplace who wants this job, who has proven to the coach that they have a higher rate of learning than me. And I've proven that I have a slower rate of learning. So I'm just like breaking this down in granularity and being very candid with you because this is just how it works. And I think it's better for you to understand and have perfect clarity over that, so that you can make the judgments of what you want to do. And also just transparently speaking, like there are definitely teams out there and companies that don't think this way. But in my opinion, like those are the companies like they won't hold you to KPIs. The sales manager's a bit of a pushover. You don't really respect him. And his approach and don't think you can learn much from the job, but it pays you a good base salary and you stay there and it's comfortable and you go home at the end of the day and you switch off. Like there are totally those careers. And I actually have no judgment on what you want to do. I think in a lot of ways that is, a quote unquote more pleasurable like life experience and stuff like that. But it just depends what you want. Like at a company where you're going to learn a lot, it's very fast growing, and you will become the best version of yourself. It's never going to come with that. It's always going to come with this sort of analysis. Cool. So Hormozi talks about this if you listen to him. Rate of learning is the same situation, different action, right? So if you keep running into the same situation and not changing your action, then you're not learning. And so Here's like the symptoms and the warning signs. If your KPIs haven't improved for 2 to 4 weeks, especially monthly, the data is telling you and I you have not learned anything, right? And a phrase that Lucas and I always say to each other, and if you want to be a high performer and get everything you want in life, you must adapt this to your vocabulary, is reality doesn't care. Because there is always a reason. Like if you're implementing things and you feel like things are working, but the KPIs and the data says that you're not improving, and I say, hey, look, you haven't improved, you will always have a reason, and so do I, as to why. Well, I feel like I have, but I did this, but lead flow has been down, but on this call, this particular thing happened, which usually doesn't happen. Like there is always a reason. Like at the end of the day, you could refer to these as excuses. I think referring to them as excuses is lacks a little bit of context and granularity and is a little bit too dismissive. I don't think they're excuses. I just think they're reasons. I like to refer to them as reasons, right? Like, I have reasons as to why I'm not at the level that I want to be in life, but you always need to follow it with, but reality doesn't care, right? And I say this to Lucas all the time because Lucas and I, we have a never-ending list of things on our to-do list that have to all be done to an exceptionally high level to get to the level that we want. And we always have reasons as to why they can't be done and why they haven't been done, but reality doesn't care. They need to be done, which is kind of like a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. And it's a tough wall to face, but the best people, the ones who win, the one that change the world, the ones that get everything they want in life, they face it and then they change, right? It's like the sales guy, the top sales guy who hits KPIs every month. It's like, do you think that guy doesn't have a massive long list of reasons and excuses as to why it's difficult for him to hit KPIs every single month? Of course he does. It's not like you're facing like you're not unique. Like you're not facing an entirely unique set of challenges and problems that nobody else has ever faced in your situation that's gone to the top, right? The difference is, do you feed the excuses? And really, another great word for them is stories. Like, do you feed the stories that you tell yourself, or do you acknowledge the stories and then follow it with, but reality doesn't care, so what am I going to do? So this is just a bit of like mindset stuff for you to really get you into a different, like into the frame of mind and kind of walk you through the approach mentally to how we need to, like what it takes to really get 10 times more learning out of the same information twice as fast. And the cool part about all this high accountability stuff is, and this challenge is, you will make way faster progress. And where you are in 12 months is genuinely going to actually be in reality where it would have where you are in terms of where it would have taken you 2 years to get to, right? And wouldn't we all want that? So let's get into actually a little bit more specifics on how to do it. So if your KPIs haven't improved on a 2 to 4 week basis, and this changes, right? This could be on a daily thing depending on what it is. Like if your tone sucks, your KPIs in terms of like your qualified rate should go up in like a matter of 72 hours, depending on how good you are at implementing the solution, right? It doesn't have to take this long. This is just a safe time that if I looked at your KPIs and said nothing's improved for 4 weeks, we're way off here. Like we're way off and we have not gone through this. So let's talk about it. So if our KPIs haven't improved, the data is telling us you haven't learned because number one, you have not tried to accurately diagnose your constraint. And as we go through this, I want you to think about what could it be for you. So number one, you have not tried to accurately diagnose your constraint. You haven't sat down with a pen and a pad and looked at your numbers in some spare time and actually said to yourself, what is my number one constraint? Number two, you have tried to diagnose the constraint, but you haven't accurately diagnosed your number one constraint. So you've sat down, you've looked at it, and you've diagnosed a constraint, but it just wasn't accurate. And by the way, you're probably thinking, well, how do I know if it's accurate? Have I accurately diagnosed my constraint? Ask me. Come to me and like copy and paste this out. After you've watched this video, sit down, think on it, and then come to me and ask me. And if you ask me and we work on it and you implement a solution for 2, 3, 4 days, your KPIs don't improve, come back and ask me. Like I'm here to help you win and crush it. And I genuinely, like business stuff aside, I genuinely fucking love, and what lights me up the most is helping people become the best version of themselves by facing the challenges to overcome and get there. Because that's essentially what I've designed my entire life around. And it's helped me change my life, right? And I know that despite the discomfort of doing this, you will have a fucking way better life because I've seen it happen hundreds of times. So come to me, please know that you're not by yourself behind your laptop working on this. If you come to me with this, I'm not going to look at like, dude, you're so off. How dumb are you? I'm never going to say that. I hope you know that. I'm going to look and say, okay, cool, but off here, here, and here. Here's why. Let's work on X, Y, Z. Let's do it. Let's crush this. Okay. So you've tried to diagnose, but you've inaccurately diagnosed your number one constraint. Or number three, you have accurately diagnosed your number one constraint, but you have not identified the correct solution that is in a repeatable, simple, and obvious format. Let me replace that word. To that specific constraint. Now, notice even the way that I'm breaking down what it could be is very specific. It's very clear here. It's like, it's this, but if you tried that, then it's this. But if you tried that and that, then it's this, right? That's how we need to think through. This is essentially a good example of assessing the same information you've already had at your fingertips in a new way with more granularity. This right here is an example of doing that. So the information you have in front of you right now hasn't changed, right? Like it hasn't changed. It's still the same person, the same call review, same call recording, same KPIs, but now how you're looking at it is more granular. We're getting more lessons from the same information. And then if we do this more regularly, that's half the time. So you've accurately diagnosed your number one constraint, but you have not identified the correct solution in a repeatable, simple, and obvious format in terms of it being in front of you. It's that constraint. B, and or you have done it right, but you have not broken down that solution into a simple implementable framework, which you've pasted in front of you, which you can now actually implement on every call when you have the chance. So this one here is essentially you haven't identified the correct solution. But let's pretend we have identified the correct solution, aka we need to lean out when someone says X, right? Then you haven't broken out how to actually lean out and put it in a simple implementable framework, aka just a simple script or a dot point script or whatever. And B, you haven't pasted it in front of you so you can actually implement it on the call. So you've identified it, you have it in a simple framework, but you haven't got it in front of you to implement when the time arises, right? Can you see how by breaking this down with more granularity, it's easier to solve and you can get more clarity over what it actually is? Because looking at this, I'm sure that you can say, okay, well, I have tried, but I guess I haven't accurately diagnosed it yet. And how do we know if we have accurately diagnosed it? Well, we've followed all these steps and the KPIs haven't improved, right? Cool, moving on. I'm going to try and move quickly through this video, despite it going to be a little bit of a long one. Number 4, you have identified the correct solution to that constraint, but you are not implementing the solution on the call. So you know what you should do, but you're not implementing it, right? Pretty common one. B, or you have not implemented the solution on calls hard enough. This is like if I said you need to improve your tonality and you improve your tonality by 1% on the calls. You're doing it. Maybe you have the note written in front of you and you've broken down the tonality in a framework that you find implementable so it makes sense, right? But you've improved your tonality by 1%, right? So you're not implementing it hard enough. Number C, this is also a common one, is you haven't implemented it for long enough. So this is like consistency in time. So you've done it on one call. You haven't done it on all 25 answers today over the past 5 days, right? On every call over the past 5 days. This is a really common one. This also relates a little bit more to, I'd say, like the skill element of like actually getting good at it through repetitions, or independently enough. So you're also changing 50 other things. And now that constraint is actually no longer the constraint. It's moved to a lack of focus, right? So for example, if you're working on your tonality, but you stop framing the call at all, and now the prospect's going off to Pluto, and you're just talking about their cats, but you're doing it in a really pleasant tonality, your KPIs will not reflect an improvement because you've changed it. Is this hard? Fuck yeah, it's hard. But if it was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing, to throw the old cliche at you. It's very true. Right? So you need to sit down and look at this. And you need to have this fucking laminated in your shower. So you look at it every day. if you have this blueprint in your head, you will make very fast progress. It's like if you've been working your ass off, doing call reviews, busting your ass, hitting input, and your KPIs haven't improved, your income hasn't improved, you're working on the wrong thing. It's just as simple as that. And I know you have reasons, but remember, reality doesn't care. Reality doesn't care. Now let's get into some implementation of feedback framework, right? Because identifying solutions is also another way of me giving you feedback, right? It's kind of like solution and feedback are kind of like, you can kind of, swap them for one another. So how do I do this? Number one, I view this as a situational trigger. It's like what happens, right? So a situational trigger to actually implement feedback on a call. Number one, when do we implement feedback on the call? Well, it needs to be in relation to a situational trigger. Now, situational trigger can be like a unique thing. For example, a sophisticated buyer says, I don't want to go through this call, dude. Just tell me what the price is, right? That could be a situational trigger. There's also just like a general, inbuilt permanent trigger. Like when someone answers the phone and says, hello, you should be smiling and you should have good tonality, right? That is like a permanent trigger that's just, it's always in place. But then there's more of a situational trigger where when you ask someone why now, for example, and they say, oh, I just saw the YouTube ad. That's why I booked in the call. That's a situational trigger. So if you are trying to implement a way to get a deeper answer when someone says that, you first need to identify what the trigger is to implement the feedback. Because if you don't know when to implement the feedback, it'd be like you having 10 different solutions on your desk, but you never know when to use any of them or play the card, right? So you need to know the situational trigger for when to play the card. So what I would do is I would write out a situational trigger for a constraint that you're working on. And this is just deep analyzation of your own self, right? I would write out a situational trigger. Let's just say a sophisticated buyer at the start of a setting call says, what's the price, right? What is your old solution? Identify it. What do you do? And in like, remember the murky rookie, not in a negative way, but just the beginner with little experience, they have watered down, soft, blurry half solutions. So, for example, if you listen to your calls and you then have like go on like this bit of a messy, no structured ramble and rant of how you try and handle that, and then you listen back to your calls and it sounds like that, it's not a clear, sharp handle, then that's the solution you need to write here, right? You're going on a tangent, right? Or like you don't directly address the fact that he's asked you price and you just try and reframe the call without addressing the fact that he's just asked you price, right? And so what's the old outcome? Well, the old outcome is you lose rapport, you lose frame, the guy gets frustrated and then says, no, that doesn't really make sense, actually. No, I just want to know what the price is, dude. I don't want to go through the whole sales pitch. That would be the old outcome, right? So without you, like what I would want to have before I try and implement solutions is essentially just some clarity. And you can like restructure this in the way that you want. I'm just walking you through how we need to get clarity over this so that we can get more out of the call reviews and things moving forward. Number two is we would need to write down what the new solution is. So what is the actual solution? So for example, if the solution is to lean out and reframe in that scenario, I would write lean out and reframe. Then you need to have a version of the solution that's simple to implement. This is a lot of what we've covered in the Breakfast Club in terms of rewriting stuff, right? So for example, if we go to the LMS, and I acknowledge 100% that in a perfect world, as your coach, I would have a script that's simple and a trigger written for everything. And I'm working on it in terms of like writing out these breakfast clubs. But unfortunately, reality is it's just I can't click my fingers and have that perfectly written, simplified for every scenario ever. Right. So we kind of have to, I need to work better at doing this, and then you need to work better at getting more out of it. So for example, challenging self-level answers framework. If we go into here, there is a framework. We ask our first question, prospect gives a short answer, we acknowledge, give a reason why, or we ask and we expand. They give another bad answer, we acknowledge, we lean out, we challenge. So this is literal script, word for word, written for you that you need to take the time to sit down and identify that if this is a constraint, that you're struggling with, you need to sit down, go into the LMS, look for it, or say, hey, Lockie, this is my constraint. Do you have any ideas of videos you could point me towards in the LMS? Right? Rather than just submitting call review after call review after call review, I give you feedback. You watch the video once, you nod your head, oh yeah, that makes sense, that makes sense. You get on the call, you try and remember it, you don't identify any triggers, you don't do it, or you do it really poorly, you lose the call and you think, that didn't work. Let me submit the call to Lockie to review with the same question. That's kind of what's happening right now. And so we don't want that to happen. So that's kind of what we're going through here. So this would be in a very implementable way. Now, this is too much text or whatever it is, then you need to rewrite this in your own time in a way that is more implementable for you, right? Cool, hope that makes sense. And then you need to have a reminder in front of you. And if you need to have a reminder for the trigger as well, I would also put that in front of you. This can be on a sticky note, on a whiteboard. I know Quinn has like a document like this, and he's got like 7 different documents open. And when someone says, oh, I just saw the ad, Quinn's like, yes. And then he goes to his document and he just goes bang and reads it, and then it works. Or works a lot better, right? So if you need a trigger, for example, they ask about ad, then you go to the solution. So for example, with objection handling, we have this written out in a bit of a similar way. For example, if we go down to an uncertainty objection, and we open up this, I have it written out over here. If we click on this, this is the trigger. Someone says, I'm just too nervous. We click on it, bang, gotcha. So you know this is what you need. It's just a little bit about nerves then, right? Straight into it. But if they say it's just a lot of money, okay, cool, dude, I hear you. And just for context, when you say it's a lot of money, do you really mean X? Right? And so, like, obviously, I can't write a little thing out here for every single person, and you all have different constraints. So you need to have your own document of this, so that when someone says it's just a lot of money and you lose an objection to that, you don't submit 5 call reviews with the same problem. You go and you create a solution like this. You put it in front of you somewhere it's applicable. Then the next time you run into it's just a lot of money, you go bang, you hit this. Then when that doesn't work, then you submit the call review to me. And you say, hey, Lockie, I implemented this solution. It didn't work. What do I need to change? Then I can say, sweet dude, we need to change XYZ thing about this. Then guess what happens? You get on the next call, you read it the new time, the new version of the solution, and you get a better outcome. Your KPIs go up, your money goes up, your confidence goes up, your skill level goes up, your self-esteem goes up, it all goes up, right? This is the process. And the funny thing is, people, we all actually do this. We just do it in a 1.0 version way, which I described above, which is why it takes most people 10, 15 years to get good at anything. It's because they kind of go through life trying to do something similar to this, learning from their mistakes, but they learn from their mistakes like a kite in the wind. And then the solutions they implement, they're like half-baked solutions, watered down, poor implementation, and all that kind of stuff. Cool. So this would be a version of a simple to implement solution. Acknowledge reason why, ask. And then you need to have it in front of you, a trigger and reminder. This would be example of a trigger, and this would be the example of it having done it. And then if you want a clearer reminder, I would have it on a sticky note literally in front of you. Or you could have like a corkboard, and you could just like corkboard the solutions there. Or a whiteboard. Probably a whiteboard's a bit better than a corkboard. Cool. And then you get the new outcome. So the new outcome will be whatever the new outcome is. Like the sophisticated buyer will say, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, well, I guess like, look, my main motivation right now is I'm not happy at my job and I'm just looking for ways to supplement my income. Ding! That was way better than our old solution of fumbling around and the guy saying, yeah, look, no, that didn't really make sense. I guess like what I'm trying to get out of this is a price because depending on how much you guys would charge, it just depends if I want to do this or not. Right? That would be a different outcome. And we need to analyze it. So we would listen back to the call recording. We want to analyze the improvement in the prospect's response. And we'll also look at the difference in the KPIs. I'll get more to this in a moment, but this is our qualitative data. So what's the quality of the response? And then this is quantitative data. What's the quantity increase or decrease in the KPIs? Then we practice and repeat. Cool. Action steps from here. Number 1 is you need to look at your data. You need to look at your data. I would know the data like the back of my hand. I do know the data like the back of my hand for the companies that we run. The number 1 constraint will lie in the data. So where are you off your KPIs? If you don't know what the number one constraint is, please come to me and confirm all of these things. Like whatever you're thinking here, in order of needle, whatever you're thinking in regards to all this stuff and all this stuff, come run it by me. Say, hey, Lockie, I'd love to book in a 30-minute time with you to go over Zoom and walk through what I've sat down and gone through here. To be honest, if you don't do that, I would be like pretty disappointed. Like, okay, well, like he either thinks he knows this perfectly, which in that case, if you know this perfectly, fantastic, makes my life really easy, right? Or you just don't want to do it, right? So let me know. Cool. Moving forward. Nice one. Once we've identified the number one constraint based on our data, we need to then identify the top 3 possible constraints related to that KPI for you specifically. So there's probably going to be a couple things that you can work on, right? I mean, there's going to be 100 things you could always work on. That's the challenge of prioritization. It's how you decide not what to do, and yeah, what to do essentially, right? So I would list the top 3 possible constraints related to that KPI for you specifically. It's going to change. Like close rate for you, there may be 3 constraints in your call or your mindset that cause you to have a low close rate versus someone else. I would then rank them in terms of needle moving stuff. Like if I could only solve, this is a good question, if I could only solve one of these constraints and it would have the biggest impact on my sales, what would it be? If you need to write out a paragraph expanding on the constraint for more clarity, you can do so as well. This will help you dictate what the number one thing is. If you're unsure, let me know. Number 4, I would identify your current implementation framework. This just kind of gives you clarity of what you're already doing. And when you have clarity of what you're already doing, the flaws in it usually jump out. That's kind of why we do call reviews, is because the flaw in the call jumps out when you listen back to it. Instead of taking sales call after sales call after sales call, never reviewing it and thinking, I need to get better at my tonality on this next call. But you don't know why your tonality sucks right now. It's like trying to get better at playing tennis, but if you never watch a video of you playing tennis, how can you improve your forearm swing? So what's the situational trigger that you're responding to right now? And maybe you're just missing it, right? That's usually often what it is for like really new reps. They just miss the situational trigger. But after you've spoken to a few sophisticated buyers who say, dude, just tell me what the price is, and you start to get an idea, okay, this is a situational trigger that I need to respond to. Then how are you responding it and what outcome is that creating? You don't have to get crazy on this. It's just essentially identifying like what's happening here. Like, for example, if you're leaning out and challenging prospect, and they're saying things like, do you not want me in this program, and starting to get a weird vibe and thinking that it's just not for them, that's the outcome it's creating, right? Then you need to list what are the top 3 solutions to that constraint, and then I'd repeat this process. Rank it in order of needle movingness. Then we want to focus on the number 1. And the cool part is you will subconsciously also improve number 2 and 3 because you'll just be aware of it. But in terms of like specific solutions I'd be targeting, it'd be number 1. 6, we want to recreate the solution in a simple and repeatable framework you can actually implement on calls and have it in front of you. So if we say that the solution to surface level answers is to acknowledge the surface level answer, give a clear reason as to why we're going to re-ask it, then re-ask it and tell them to expand. If that's the solution, right, we need to re-ask the question to get a better answer. Then we want to break down the solution in a simple and repeatable framework we can actually implement on calls. Then we want to have the tab open when we're on calls, or have a sticky note in front of you with a trigger solution. Let me come over here. Same thing with the uncertainty handle. If you're struggling with that one, someone says it's just a lot of money, we go bang. Now you may be thinking, I could have a solution, a trigger and a solution for everything. You're right. You should. But this is a process. We want to do it one at a time based on your constraint, or else it's just going to be the reading 50 different marketing books trying to implement everything, but still sucking a marketing situation, right? We want to implement and beat the boss that we're at and then move on. Okay. People who are really good, they have this in their head. Like, they're not always in their head, like they may have a script in front of them as well, but they've just done this so many times. They need to start like this. Well, the people who progress quickly, they start like this anyway. The people who are just naturals, they're just naturals because they've been doing it for 30 years, not naturals because they've been doing it well. And then they just kind of have this process in their head, right? And then number 7 is we want to practice it on calls consistently, then measure the data, quantitative and then qualitative, to see if you're progressing. So how a quantitative data would be if a sophisticated buyer says, it's kind of like the on the call in the moment improvement, and the response in the prospect. If a sophisticated buyer says, look, dude, just give me the price, so I can know what you guys do. And then we acknowledge, lean out, give a reason why, and then we give a reason why we ask. And well, I mean, I'm using two different scenarios here. Let's pretend they give a surface level answer, right? If they give a surface level answer to the why now question, and then we use this framework, and then they give us a better answer than we've been receiving in the past, and they expand, that would be a good sign. That is great quantitative data. However, if the person still gives us a shit surface level answer and they disagree with you, that is poor quantitative data. It tells us we don't even need to look at the qualitative data, the numbers, the KPIs. We already know that we've messed up, right? Qualitative data is if we get a good quantitative approach, we want to see, do our KPIs go up? Does our close rate go up? Does our average cash collected go up? Does our qualified rate on calls go up when we're asking the finance, the FQ2 question? Is our qualified rate improving, right? To see if we're actually progressing. Then, if the data is progressing after 1 day to 1 week, if the data is progressing and after the data is progressing, I probably looked like I cooked that. After 1 day and 1 week, the data isn't improving. Then you have identified. Oh, sorry, that does make sense. So if the quantitative and the qualitative data isn't improving, then you've identified the wrong constraint or solution, and we need to repeat the process until it increases your data and it's reflected in your KPIs, right? So, for example, if your qualified rate is improving, right? So you've identified your qualified rate on a setting call is your number one constraint because people don't trust you. They're not giving you good FQ2s. And then you're working on that and your qualified rate is going up, but your number of sets isn't going up. Or let's say, for example, your number of qualified, because your number of sets probably would go up. But say your qualified live calls isn't going up in the closer's calendar each day, then what that means is it's not the number one constraint. What you've identified in terms of qualified rate is not the number one constraint. It may be show rate, right? And so your solution you've implemented to get a better answer to FQ2 to improve your qualified rate it's the data's telling you, reality's telling you that's not what you need to improve because people are getting off the phone, and even though you qualified more people, they don't like you and they don't want to show up to the next the appointment with the closer. Does that make sense? So, for example, you could artificially increase your qualified rate if you thought that was the constraint on a setting call by telling everyone that it's just $1,000. Right? You could get in for $1,000, and a lot more people will say yes to that. However, if you're doing that, chances are you don't actually know how to solve the problem because your skill set just isn't there yet. And it's an indication to me that the quality of the phone call is based around the product and the price, not helping the person achieve their desires and their dreams and having conviction in that. Therefore, when they get off the phone call, they are focused on, when I show up to this next sales call, I'm going to have to spend $1,000. And we didn't really talk too much about my desires, my dreams, and he didn't really believe in me. So I don't have a lot of conviction in anything he said. So I'm not going to show up to that call. And then your show rate suffers, right? So then we need to look at that and say, okay, cool. Well, I no longer need to try and work on my qualified rate. That's not the solution. What I'm implementing there in regards to just giving people $1,000 out, that isn't the solution. I need to work on my show rate. So then you switch the topic to what could be the top 3 possible constraints that are related to show rate, my show rate KPI specifically being low. Well, one of those would probably be that you're mentioning and you're telling people that it's $1,000 to get into the program and not talking about their dreams and their desires and where they want to go. So when people get off the call, right, the only thing they remember is the $1,000 price tag for the next call. They don't even remember anything about us wanting to help them, right? So I hope that's just a bit of an example. So I'm going to wrap this video up here. What I want you to do is go through this. You'll definitely want to watch this a couple times. And if you start approaching your improvement this way, you're going to massively improve. And then another little side tangent. Let's add a little side quest here. Is when submitting call reviews, cross-reference your support question with the LMS. Right, I'm going to start when I see the support questions. I'm going to start. I'm not going to be doing all the work for you because I'll waste heaps of time. But I'm going to start seeing your support question and being like, okay, is this already answered in the LMS? Right? Because we have a shitload of different trainings and flavor appraisals, breakfast clubs. And it's like if you're asking challenging surfer level answers framework and you haven't watched this and you have made no mention of watching this and trying to implement it and what you're now working on, I may just redirect you to this. I'll still review calls because I want to get call reviews in because there's little nuances and things that you may not pick up that I can help share with you. So it's not about like you just now going into the LMS and watching videos endlessly. It's about the balance. So yeah, before I submitted any call review, that I would do if I was in your shoes, I would cross-reference it with the LMS. I would watch it in the LMS, and you may find, that makes perfect sense. That's exactly what I'm struggling with. I haven't implemented that solution. So instead, I'm going to spend my morning rewriting this in a way that's simple, implementing on today's calls, and you may find that you can get way better without me even having to review that call because you just leveled up your own rate of learning by yourself. That would be fantastic. And you may say, well, that makes perfect sense. I already have a solution. I'm going to get him to review a different call with it from a different problem. And before you submit it, what do? Go to the LMS, you read through it, and you're like, maybe more call reviews right now isn't the solution. Maybe I need to go and do XYZ thing, right? So I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, please let me know. Let's level the fuck up. Let's crush this. This is really important. And then how do we get better at this? We just need to do it again and again and again. And I'm here to help you win. Please check in with me and let me know what you're doing, how you're doing it, the difference in the data, what's improving, because our end of weeks are really important when we go through the data. If we are catching up on an end of week and the data is the same, or the data is worse, or the data is not improving and you don't have clarity around it, that's a really, really poor sign for me in terms of a coach in regards to your rate of learning. And so I really want to help you improve that so that you can achieve the best possible version of yourself and we can crush goals. All right, awesome. I shall see you in the next one.